What happens when a band fueled by raw ambition, gritty determination, and a lot of chaos decides to break all the rules? Enter Skid Row, a group that rose from the New Jersey club scene to dominate the late 80s and early 90s rock charts with their electrifying sound and rebellious spirit. But their journey was anything but smooth. From feuds with rock icons to high-profile controversies, and all the way from chart-topping triumphs to financial woes, Skid Row's story is a roller coaster ride of fame, fortune, and fallout. Today we're diving into the group's second album, which was also record-setting, Slave to the Grind. Skid Row, formed in 1986 in New Jersey by bassist Rachel Bolan and guitarist Dave Snake Sabo. The duo envisioned a band that could rival the hard rock giants of the era. They soon recruited guitarist Scotty Hill and Rob Affuso on drums through newspaper ads. They also had vocalist Matt Fallon fronting their group, which completed their initial lineup. In 1987, though, Fallon left the group and Canadian vocalist Sebastian Bach joined the band. Bach was discovered at a wedding where his powerful voice caught the attention of Jon Bon Jovi's parents, who recommended him to Sabo. Jon and Sabo had actually grown up together. Bach's arrival marked a significant turning point for the group. His charisma and vocal prowess perfectly complemented the band's high-energy sound. Sabo and Jon, as teenagers, had actually had a childhood pact that they would help out each other if one of them became big in the music business. Well, Jon honored his promise, and they soon shared management with Doc McGee representing their groups. By the end of the 80s, Skid Row nabbed a deal with Atlantic Records and issued their self-titled debut record in January of '89. Produced by Michael Wagner, the album featured a mix of gritty, hard rock tracks like Youth Gone Wild and Piece of Me, alongside the iconic power ballads 18 in Life and I Remember You. The power ballads were both top 10 hits on the Billboard Hot 100. To promote their debut record, Skid Row opened for Bon Jovi on their New Jersey Syndicate tour and later joined Aerosmith on their Pump tour. Their music videos received heavy rotation on MTV, further boosting their popularity. But Bach's personality also created issues for the group. At one gig opening for Aerosmith, the frontman injured an audience member by throwing a glass bottle hurled on stage back into the audience, striking a teenage girl. It resulted in much unwanted publicity, and it cost the frontman a few $100,000 in legal fees and a settlement. Couple this with him wearing a highly offensive t-shirt backstage that was published in a rock magazine, and it resulted in increasing tension between Bach and his bandmates. You also had business issues and public feuds, as well as the fact that the band didn't get the 90s off to a good start. Bach recounted in his book 18 in Life on Skid Row that after the group sold 5 million records and the fact that they'd been on the road for almost a year, they realized that they'd been ripped off. Bach wrote in his memoir, "By the time the first album's touring cycle was over, our lives had changed immeasurably. We had come to the stark realization that we'd been ripped off royally," adding, "taken down the Hershey Highway, screwed, blued, and tattooed. As far as the business went, it sucked to be us." A big part of the reason was because of the publishing deal they had signed with Jon Bon Jovi and guitarist Richie Sambora, which saw a lion's share of Skid Row's royalties go to the Bon Jovi members. That started a very public feud, which was instigated by Bach, who repeatedly slammed Jon in the press. On top of that, the band's name was being held hostage. In Bach's book, he recounted how around the time they were working on their second record in the rehearsal space, they had soon learned that there had long been a band using the name Skid Row since the 70s that was from Ireland. That group featured guitar player Gary Moore. The Irish Skid Row wanted the American band to pay them money to use the name, so Bach and company soon forked over $35,000 US. Then the group had to turn their attention to their highly anticipated second record. Skid Row from the start was clear-eyed in their goal with their second album. They wanted to make a harder-sounding record. Bach remarked, "Although we were a hard-rocking band, our two big radio hits were both ballads. This pissed us off. In our young piss and vinegar style, we made a conscious effort to make that album as hard as it could be."
I remember specifically when I Remember You was a big hit on MTV. We were playing in Daytona Beach, and I was walking around on the beach, before the gig, and two guys were walking around, and they recognized me, and they started going, I remember you, and like mocking me. And in days previously, I would have tried to kick their ass because, in those days, if somebody insulted your band, you were expected to beat them up. That's the way it was. But I didn't, I was like mocking myself with them because I was sick of me too at one point because they played that video so much that you just get tired of something if you see it too many times. So then on Slave to the Grind, we were like, we're going to show everybody that we can put out a rock song, and then that's a big hit.
The band's decision to embrace heavier themes was going to alienate some of their fans and, of course, give some anxiety to their record label. But it also served to solidify their credibility in hard rock circles. Bach admitted to author John Wiederhorn that I've always liked music that was diverse and we wanted to take some chances maybe, but we weren't stupid. We weren't about to turn our backs on everything that got us to where we were. Pantera was a huge influence on the album. When Bach and Scotty Hill were working on the song Mudkicker, Hill had a copy of Pantera's Cowboys from Hell. Bach recalled, Hill said, dude, check out this band. I really dig them. And that's when I checked out the album sleeve. As he put it on the stereo, I couldn't believe my ears. As the opening guitar riff to Cowboys from Hell came out of the speakers, I knew we had found the band we were looking to come on tour with us. Skid Row ended up touring with Pantera to support their second record. A bulk of the material written for their album titled Slave to the Grind was done in Bach's house and Fuso's garage. The title track was born out of a feeling that Bach had on their first tour that the band didn't have a good opening song for their set. On that tour, they frequently opened their shows with Making a Mess, a song that the frontman felt wasn't fast enough. Bach admitted that the title track was inspired by a sped-up version of Van Halen's Dead or Alive. Once Skid Row came up with the song, Bolan remarked, it sounds like a grind. Then the title Slave to the Grind was born. But the band struggled to beat the version they cut on the demo, and so they used the demo on the final record. The title track was recorded and mixed in just 1 hour. This shift in the band's style was best represented on tracks like Monkey Business, an anti-drug diatribe, and the title track. Bach recounted in his book what he felt when he was introduced to the song Monkey Business, admitting, when I first heard it, I thought the main riff of the track sounded too much like Guns N' Roses' song Paradise City. I got an idea for how Monkey Business could sound more unique and hummed Snake the new chords. We then hammered out together what eventually became the main riff of the song. Speaking of Guns N' Roses, Bach added in his book that how during the writing of their second record, GNR's ex-drummer Steven Adler, who was fired for his substance abuse issues, used to come over to his house. Bach had to kick the drummer out because he found him using in the bathroom. Meanwhile, the song In a Darkened Room to Bach represented the best ballad the band had done to date, but it did step on some toes. Frontman admitted in his book that after the album came out, Slash of Guns N' Roses pulled him aside and told him that the guitar part in the chorus closely resembled Sweet Child of Mine. The song Creepshow deals with seeing yourself talked about on a tabloid-style television show, while Psycho Love is a song about a serial-killing prostitute. It was during the recording of Slave to the Grind that Skid Row also had a special guest in the studio, as Bach revealed here.
I also remember Lars Ulrich being in the studio with me when I cut that vocal. And I was literally looking at him going, I'm gonna show you some shit right now, buddy. And I remember doing that. And he was like, I go, how is it? He goes, it's roaring. What? It's roaring. I don't feel like doing my Lars impression, but.
The band also had some unwanted guests in the studio. They had recorded the album in Fort Lauderdale at Gloria Estefan's New River Studios. But given the band's popularity, kids in the area soon learned of Skid Row's presence in their city and started queuing outside the studio, hoping to get a glimpse of the band. Bach told Music in San Francisco in 2021, one day they were like 40 kids out there, like the whole parking lot was packed. I decided to order 5 giant pizzas for all of them. And I walked out and I sat down with them and gave them all pizza. That's a great memory. I only did it once because after that, more kids came out the next day because they had heard about it. The frontman admitted he was pretty miserable during some of the recording of the album, telling Loudwire, "I'm a miserable, rotten for a lot of the time when I'm making a record. And all of a sudden, when we hear the end and we've put all this work into it, I start hearing what I want to hear come out of the speakers. Then I go from being the most miserable you've ever met into the happiest, most energetic dude around." Maybe not helping was that Bach also ran into some issues with his voice during the recording process. It turned out Bach had blew out his voice, and the recording sessions had to be halted for several weeks. Released on June 11th, 1991, Slave to the Grind was being issued just as Billboard was changing how they tallied up album sales. A new system was being introduced called SoundScan. So Slave to the Grind came out the second week this system was implemented. SoundScan required a special device to be installed on every record store counter that would in real time register each individual album sale in America. It created a process where album sales could be more accurately counted. Bach recalled in his book, "We were the guinea pigs. Nobody knew what was going to happen." Well, what happened was that Slave to the Grind debuted at the #1 spot on the Billboard album chart, selling 134,000 copies in its first week of release.
New Jersey's Skid Row will make a little bit of pop history on Monday when the group's new LP, Slave to the Grind, becomes the first hard rock album ever to debut at #1 on the Billboard chart. Sales of the record may have been swollen somewhat by the fact that it's being sold in 2 versions, one containing a song with a rowdy title, the other without it. According to a chart expert at Billboard magazine, such instant #1s are likely to become a lot more common with the new SoundScan in-store computing technology that's now being used to compile sales figures. And he says the length of stays at the top of the chart are likely to become shorter.
The band was already on the road supporting the record before it came out, something that was pretty unheard of at the time. They were opening for Guns N' Roses, who, funny enough, were also on the road supporting an album that wasn't out yet, their epic double album Use Your Illusion 1 and 2. It was widely reported at the time that Slave to the Grind was the first album to debut at the #1 spot since Michael Jackson's 1987 release Bad. Bach recalled, "It made me physically nauseous. I mean, our influences are Aerosmith, Old Kiss, Ted Nugent, Grand Funk, good old American rock and roll. For that to come in at #1 is sick." Sabo added, "For us, it's not just that we want to sell another 4 million records. What we want to do is stay around for a while like Aerosmith. We trade some sales for some respect because we're serious about the music." The album cover was designed by Bach's father, artist David Bjork. The painting was inspired by a 17th century artist named Caravaggio called Burial of St. Lucy. Due to the pressure from Tipper Gore's group, the PMRC, or the Parents Music Resource Center, Skid Row had to issue a clean version of Slave to the Grind, which replaced the song Get the Fuck Out with Beggar's Day. Bach saw the silver lining, admitting Beggar's Day was a better song than Get the Fuck Out. Get the was a tongue-in-cheek song about groupies, with a few so telling the Asbury Park Press, "It's just tongue-in-cheek, it's a joke. The band has a very wide sense of humor." He added, "Censorship is really a bunch of crap, I hate it." The only reason the band issued a censored version of the album was because in smaller towns and cities, they only have a handful of record stores, and they didn't want to make fans drive long distances to get the album. As for the theme of the record, Bolan told the Courier Post, "My motto is if you don't like what you're doing, do something else. But there's people who will torture themselves to make ends meet, which you have to do. But you can always find something that you want to do better." Like I mentioned earlier, their label Atlantic wasn't very supportive of the band's change in sound, even trying to have some say in the music videos, specifically the title track. But they butted heads with Skid Row, with Bach claiming that the label's vision didn't match what the song was actually about.
Well, you know, I remember when we showed up for the video for Slave to the Grind, they had a girl there that was in, some bondage outfit, and they had some scene they wanted to film with me in a rubber room, and I said, "You can send her home now, okay? I'm not doing that." There was two reasons. One, we didn't want to objectify women because we didn't have to. We could do whatever we want. We could do whatever we want. So we didn't want to do that. That song to us had nothing to do with like a hot chick. It didn't have anything to do with that. Plus, we were with women at the time, and we didn't want to disrespect them, you know? I mean, if I saw my wife now in a video with some dude, I'd have to whoop his ass.
Bach was also adamant in the press that they wanted the music to do the talking, and the band didn't want to be in the headlines for the wrong reasons like he was on the last record. He also admitted at the time that he was scaling back his media appearances to limit any overexposure. With the dawn of a new decade, though, he recalled to the Asbury Park Press, I think in the late 80s there was more of a focus in the music industry on form than on content. And it seems like the bands in the early 90s have reversed that. I see guitar-based bands like Nirvana, who are totally different than we are in every way, shape, or form, but they are still guitar-based drums and vocals. Bach also noticed a change in the group's audiences with their second record, with him adding, when I Remember You was out there, there'd be a bunch of good-looking girls in the pit. And now there's a bunch of guys. It's a pretty intimidating crowd. Have I gotten uglier? But they weren't free of controversy touring behind the second record. At a show at London's Docklands Arena, Bach dropped his trousers and wiped his butt with a copy of the Daily Star. Then in the summer of '91, while supporting Guns N' Roses at Wembley Stadium, they went against a warning by the Brent Council to not play the song Get the Out. Bach even read out the council's letter to 80,000 fans, much to the dismay of his bandmates. Rachel Bolan admitted to Louder Sound, that type of posed toughness was so dumb. How did a kid that went to prep school end up being such a rebel? Skid Row also got the opportunity to headline their own shows, playing alongside Pantera and Soundgarden. Despite Slave to the Grind topping the album charts, it never produced any singles as big as their debut record, and as a result, while it was still successful, it went double platinum. The first single issued, Monkey Business, peaked at number 13 on the mainstream rock tracks chart. The title track was issued as a second single, but it never charted in the States, but it did chart in the UK. The third single, Wasted Time, peaked at number 33 on the mainstream rock tracks chart, and number 88 on the Hot 100 chart. The song Quicksand Jesus was issued as a single, but it was only limited to Japan, and it also became a fan favorite. With another multi-platinum album under their belts, Skid Row were surprised to learn that they made no money. Bach wrote in his memoir, at the end of the tour grind, we all had a meeting at McGee's office in Manhattan. We were totally stoked to be home. Now it was time to wallow in the riches of our latest world tour. Surely we were all rich beyond our wildest dreams and would be able to live the rock star life to the fullest after all the success. Instead, that day we learned a brand new word. That word was shortfall. It turned out that instead of the members receiving a giant check, each one of them received a bill for their year-long Slave to the Grind tour. Bach admitted that him and his bandmates were obviously confused. He added in his book, it was explained to us that our pyro was one of the reasons for this new word we had just learned, shortfall. You guys want to be like Kiss? Well, each time you blow up one of those bombs, it's 3 Gs, not the Verizon wireless kind. Bach also added that that day was the day that the band learned the difference between net and gross. Their management and their accountants took their cuts off the gross of the tour, meaning that all the alcohol they drank and the pyro they set off and so forth was taken out after they'd paid their management and accountants. The band quickly learned that no one was really watching their budget, including themselves. Skid Row managed to hobble along with Bach for another release in 1992, an EP, before returning in 1995 with their third full-length studio album, Subhuman Race. It was their last album to feature Bach before he left the group. If you guys are interested in learning about that album, I've done a whole video on it. The link is down below. By the mid-90s, Bach's bandmates had enough of the frontman and they parted ways with him. Looking back at the album, Sabo told The Aquarian, Slave to the Grind would be my favorite for a number of reasons. I think a lot of people expected us to become formulaic, the way we had approached the first record, and we had no interest in doing that. And I'm so proud of all of us for being on the same page with that. Bach added, I'm really proud of that record. I think we could remaster it and do an amazing deluxe repackaging with lots of bonus material, but right now I seem to be the only one from the band that's interested.